Bamby is a transnational and international transgender Latina woman, president and CEO of the TransLatin Coalition, a national organization that focuses on addressing the issues of transgender Latinas in the U.S. Bamby developed the Center for Violence Prevention and Transgender Wellness, a multi-purpose, multi-service space for transgender people in Los Angeles. Bamby's remarkable and wide-ranging activist work has brought voice and visibility to not only the trans community, but also to the multiple overlapping communities and issues that her life has touched, including migration, HIV, youth, LGBT, incarceration, and Latina communities. Through her instinctive leadership, she has birthed several organizations that created community where there was none and advocated for the rights, dignity, and humanity for those who have been without a voice. Aside from her outstanding professional accomplishments, Bamby is also one of the sweetest and most considerate people around. It is not unusual to receive an uplifting and caring text from her. And I want you to know, Bamby, that your affirming words always arrive at the right time. So I'd love to ask you to join me, please, in welcoming Bamby so that she can share her insights and wisdom with our virtual audience. So Bamby, can you please join us?
Claro que sí. Primero que nada, quiero darle gracias a mi poder superior por darme la oportunidad de estar aquí con ustedes. Y también, obviamente, quiero honrar la presencia de todas las personas que nos acompañan hoy en día. For those of you who were not able to understand what I just said, it is something that I always do. I always honor my creator for giving me the opportunity to breathe one more day, and obviously for being here with you and sharing space with you. I also want to honor all the beautiful and amazing and incredible people who are joining us today. And Sandra, thank you so much for your kind words. And obviously, I want to express my gratitude to the beautiful and amazing team from Calcasa and the selection committee for thinking that I'm worth being here, sharing my experience, strength, and hope to all of you. My name is Bamby Salcedo, and I am a very privileged trans Latina mujer emigrante who has the honor and really the privilege to lead the TransLatin Coalition. I am currently the president and the CEO of the TransLatin Coalition, which is a national advocacy organization that is based in Los Angeles, that also provides direct, supportive, and life-saving services to trans and gender non-conforming people in Los Angeles. We are one of 3 or 4 trans-led organizations in Los Angeles, but we're certainly the only one who has a multiplicity of services specifically catered and designed to support the livelihood of our community. And, you know, it's important, right, for me to acknowledge my power, my privilege, I meant to say. It's important that I acknowledge my privilege because even in 2020, right, trans people continue to struggle to have access to basic things that many of us take for granted. You know, when I started my transition early on, back in the late 80s or when I was about 19 years old, back then, anything and everything that we needed, we had to resort to our own community, to our own people. And at that time, it was sex workers who were there for me and who were there to support me into uh, getting access to whatever I needed, right? It was a trans woman who gave me my first hormone shots. It was a trans woman who supported me when I was sick. And it was a trans woman who so guided me through the process and to really show me to be strong. And I firmly believe in the power of peer work and also understanding that unfortunately, even in 2020, where trans people is situated and where there's so many challenges for us to access services, despite the fact that there are many different organizations that they say they do want to support our community, but practice is different, right? And that is exactly why in 2015, as we were trying to organize people across the country in the different cities and states where we have representation, where we're seeing that trans people or our community, the people who were trying to organize, um, we're not having access to basic things, the basic services that they needed. And that's why our national group decided that we also needed to move into doing service provision. And so it's important for us to understand, right? This conference theme, right? It's called Bold Moves. And I think, in my opinion, as Sandra was saying a little while ago, right? We all of us are experiencing a critical and important moment in history in our lives, and it really is up to us to understand how bold we are going to be, not just for ourselves, but for the people who we love, for the people who love us, and for the people that we serve, and for people in general, right? I think many of us, even in the field, right, even in the sexual assault field or domestic violence field, many people think that they understand the concept of social justice. But again, when it comes to practice, even in our own work, right, when it comes to certain people, and I'm speaking specifically about trans and gender nonconforming people, right, then things change. Then some of those things don't apply because of the things that we believe. And oftentimes, the religion that we practice. And so all of those things really shape the way we do things oftentimes and the way we see other people. And so it's important for us to really understand this concept of social justice and how we collectively, right, are going to be the ones who are going to create those changes for those individuals who are the most marginalized. And certainly trans people are one of those populations that are the most marginalized. And so we are in this moment to where we have to look in, right? And we have to look inward and ask ourselves, are we in this moment in time, am I situated on a place to where I can make those bold moves that need to happen in order for us to really shift the narrative, to really shift the livelihood of many people, including trans people. And so we know, and some of you know, that trans people continue to get discriminated against while trying to access employment, while trying to access housing, that trans people are one of the most poor people in this country, right? There's studies that said that trans people make about $10,000 a year. And all of these things, right, because of how we are situated within our society, and because of the messages, and because of the institutional violence, really, that are created to diminish and really erase or try to erase our existence in this world. Trans people are situated in a very predicament situation within our society. And now that we have experienced, or that now that we're experiencing this global pandemic, right, it's important for us to also recognize that trans people are going to be set even further behind than how we were even before this pandemic, right? And this is one thing that I always say, right? If we really compare where trans people are in comparison to the gay and lesbian community, trans people are about 40 years behind, legislatively, academically, economically, you name it, right? And so this is important for us to understand that now that we're experiencing this global pandemic, right? Those individuals who did have the opportunity to have a job, right? Most trans people, again, those who have the privilege to have a job, have jobs in the service industry. For instance, many of you know, right, that trans people get jobs, doing female impersonations, for instance, or they work at restaurants, or they work, doing cleaning jobs, housekeeping jobs. And so all of those individuals lost their jobs. And also, people have jobs like doing hair and that kind of stuff, right? And so all of those individuals lost their job. And that's just a fraction of our community. And so you can imagine right now, as people are trying really to go to organizations to really find some type of support, right? We know the violence against our community, it's rampant, right? We know that at least 26 trans people have been killed this year alone. Last year, and the whole year was reported 27 individuals. And so there's a guesstimation that 2020 is going to be one of the most violent for trans people. And so again, we want to ask ourselves, what is it that we are going to do in order for us to change the landscape of all of our peoples, right? But I'm specifically talking about how trans people are going to be included into this narrative, into this narrative change that is happening. And so, we need to really understand what needs to happen in order for us to create those changes. And one of those things that need to happen is that for those of you who are individuals who have the power to create those changes, for instance, if you are a funder, it's important that you invest in trans lives. It's important that you are bold enough to understand that the lives of trans people are also important, and that we are worth investing in, right? That if we are giving the opportunity to really excel and really find and really understand what our destiny is within our society. We know as individuals, right? But because of the structural violence that we experience, right, it limits us for us to continue to thrive and succeed. And so, there's a huge disparity when it comes to funding for trans-led organizations and really investing in the lives of trans people, right? Just to give you an example, Funders for LGBTQ issues on March 30th of this year released a report in which they state that 4 cents, and this is only in the LGBTQ philanthropic world, right? Funding that goes specifically for LGBTQ organizations. This report states that 4 cents out of every $100 that are invested in LGBTQ organizations and the community, 4 cents of every $100 are going to trans-lit organizations, right? So there's a huge disparity when it comes to equity and distribution of resources. We know that in the last 5 years, more and more trans-led groups and organizations are popping up, right? Because we are coming into our power. We are coming to believe that we can create the changes that need to happen in our community. And then we get hit by a global pandemic, right? There are many trans-led groups and organizations who don't have the infrastructure or even the capacity to sustain themselves on a crisis like this, right? And so it's important for those of you who do have the power to really find ways to allocate resources to support trans-led organizations. We are very lucky as an organization, and again, I am very privileged that I have been able to build amazing relationships and connections with multiple individuals, including Calcasa, right? Who, through the support that we have gotten from Calcasa through not just these challenging times, but when we ask, for a letter of support, for instance, right? Like some people would think that those are minor things, but those are things that are important and really create not just the relationships, but create the changes that need to happen in order to support our community, right? Because it's shown that there's trust, right? It's a show that that Calcasa and Sandra in this case, right, is saying like, I believe in you, right? And I am so appreciative because of that. But I think we collectively need to think about those things, right? Some things that we think are minor could be big things, right? And so we also need to change the policies that we have within our organizations, right? There's the majority of organizations that are part of this sexual assault and domestic violence movement, if you will, right? Don't have that type of intentionality, don't have policies in place, organizational policies I'm talking about, right? That need to be accounted for, right? In other words, if any of the employees violate some of these policies, right, like there needs to be repercussions, right? And there should be no tolerance about discriminating and really practicing the invisible discrimination, right? The invisible discrimination, what I call, is a discrimination that you're not able to see, that you do practice and that you enact, but it's hard for us to prove, despite the fact that there's legislation that supports and protects trans people, at least in the state of California, right? The state of California is the most inclusive, I guess, is a state that has the most trans-inclusive legislation, if you will. And because of the lack of support that continues to happen from many different organizations and policymakers, we as a community are being bold and are making bold moves for us to understand that we as a community need to not just increase our economic power, but also build our political power. And I am so glad and grateful that this year our organization has supported and truly led one particular legislation in the state of California, which is Assembly Bill 2218, which is the Transgender Health and Equity Fund, which will create a fund that will support trans people to be healthy individuals. And for us, it's important, for us as an organization, it's important that we build a healthy trans community, right? And so there's resources that are going to be allocated through this legislation. We're also co-sponsoring Senate Bill 132, which will support trans people who are incarcerated in the state penitentiary to be able to choose where they will do their time, a place where they feel most safe. We know that prison is not safe at all for nobody, right? But we know also that trans people, particularly trans women who are incarcerated in the state penitentiary here in California, continue to experience horrible things, right? Including sexual assaults, including violence, including all of those things that we also experience out here. But obviously when you're inside, like there's nowhere you can go, because even the system, right, the correctional officers and everybody else who is within the system do not protect you. And so at least this piece of legislation will give trans people the agency to really choose where they will do their sentence that they have been committed to do. And so for us, this is huge. Assembly Bill 2218, we know that in the history of the state of California, there has not been legislation that has been crafted, organized, pushed, and created by trans and gender nonconforming people. We built a statewide coalition specifically of trans and gender nonconforming people to make sure that this legislation goes through. And so the truth is that we cannot do it alone, right? For us as an organization, and many members of our community understand that collaboration is one of those things that are important for all of us to understand what needs to be done, right? And I invite you to put all of those beliefs or all of those things that you have been taught about us, that they're not true, right? I invite you to see us as who we are, as the people that we are, and create those bold moves. Because if you are willing and able and open your heart and understand that all of us have a place within our society, but that we should have a place that is equitable and that is a loving place for all of us. I know that, I am fighting for us to have a better world, right? Despite the fact that sometimes I think that I'm may not able to see the world that I want to live in, right? But I am hopeful that we collectively can do that. And whether I do get to see that world that I want to live in or not, we can all contribute for all of us to have a better world. So I guess my time is up, Sandra?
Yes, Bamby.
Okay.
Thank you so
Well,
much.
thank you. Thank you so much, everyone. Please do take care of yourselves. Take care of yourself, of your loved ones. And thank you again so much for the opportunity to share space with all of you.